So it's still July 2nd, 2013, and now we're sitting here with Gerry White, husband of Fiona. And we'll be talking with you about your career as a longshoreman in 502. And we've got a little bit of a preview from our conversation with Fiona, but I guess we'll start with you from the beginning. So how did you get into longshoring?
Well, you've met Joe.
Mm-hmm.
I moved into the area where he lived when I was about 12. His dad was a longshoreman.
Oh, yeah?
And as things went on, after we got out of school, Joe went longshoring and I went shortly after.
Oh, yeah. So were you high school friends with Joe, or?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, he'd cause the trouble and I'd get blamed for it.
Oh, no. Is it still that way today?
Pretty much, yeah.
I knew Joe was a troublemaker. You can sense it on him. That's funny.
Which high school did you go to?
Princess Margaret High School
Oh, yeah.
in Newton, but the original one on 64th Avenue.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I live right by the one that's in Newton now, but on the Delta side. Slightly less scary side
Oh, yeah.
here.
They call it Panorama something now. They tore the old one down.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, Panorama Ridge or something secondary or something like that. Anyway. So Joe's dad was a longshoreman, so did Joe get into it first and then kind of tell you about it, and you thought, oh, that sounds like a
Yeah,
good
he went that summer when we got out of school. He went longshoring, and then in November, December, I had a series of fights with my dad, and he told me to go out and get a job, so I did.
Oh, wow.
Arguments,
Just like
not
that,
fights,
yeah.
shouldn't say that.
And what year would that have been?
I started in 1961.
Okay.
January 10th, 1961, 1 p.m. replacement. It was pouring rain, and I didn't have any rain gear.
Oh, no.
Oh my goodness.
So was it easy to get on there, like to get into as a casual, or?
Relatively easy, easier than it is now.
Mm-hmm.
You just go to the hall and wait, and when they needed people, they'd call you up and give you a number, and that's the way you got started.
Okay.
You had to have a number first.
That was a dispatch system. Got a number?
I'm sorry, what?
Is that how the dispatch system worked? Is that you had a number and you waited around the hall?
Yeah, you get a work number, and then you get on the casual boards.
On the boards, yeah.
At that time, they give you what they call a yellow card, and then you'd be in a box, and you go in a rotation. And when they got through all the senior people, they'd come down to the casual boards, and you'd get sent out when they needed
Oh, yeah.
extra people. And you just worked your way up. Each year, you got a little bit more work as you went up the boards.
Oh, yeah. And did you have to be recommended by a member? Like, is that how it works now? You've got to be recommended by someone who's a member?
Well, now they have the BCMA and the union get together, and they have a big, massive signing up process, and they
Mm-hmm.
have to write exams, and they get far too many people and not enough work to put all the people to work. So
Right.
It's not the system I really agree with, but nothing I can do anything about
Yeah.
it. So.
But it was a little easier for you anyway to get your foot in the door as onto the casual boards and that kind of thing.
Well, now you can't just go down to the hall and get the job.
No,
If you
no.
go down and wait around, you can't. Where we used to be able to do that, they can't do that.
Right.
They have to wait for a major event to happen where they're going to hire maybe 100 people or so.
Yeah, right. And so what were the kind of early days like on the job when you were first doing your casual work?
Hard.
Yeah.
It's all manual labor, all what we call hand stove,
Mm-hmm.
lumber, bars of lead,
Mm-hmm.
zinc, sacked fertilizer, sacked coffee.
And everything was loose, yeah? You'd have to take...
One at a time, yeah.
Yeah.
The sacks weighed 112 pounds, the lead bars weighed 100,
Wow.
and all hand stove lumber. It would just come down in loads, and you just pick up lumber, and if it's heavy enough, two of you worked on it. If it was too heavy, we got PVs and rollers and rolled them into place.
Mm-hmm. And what was the training like? Was that something that did you go right into the gang system when you started as a casual worker?
You went to the gang you were dispatched at, and the training was on the job training. You got yelled at a lot if you didn't do what you're supposed to do, or
Yeah.
quick enough. But no, it was not like now. There was no training program as such. You just went to work and learned on the job.
And would you learn from the older guys who were in the gang
yeah.
that you were dispatched with?
That was the advantage, because back then we had, there were 13-man gangs, but 8 men worked down below
Oh, yeah.
in the ship. So generally either one or two replacements. Most of the time you'd be working with 6 or 7 regular people, and they would teach you how to do the job. And if you didn't do the job or couldn't do it, they just sent you back to the home.
Oh yeah. My goodness. And so did you learn pretty quick then if you made a mistake or did something wrong?
Well, my brother and I had worked with my dad. He had a auto wrecking and scrap business, and so we worked from the time we were. Well, we used to go out on the truck with him thinking we were getting special treatment, but we didn't know till later he was tricking us into working.
Good for him though. You must have, so you had a little experience with working when you got in.
We knew how to work.
It's been helpful.
But that was the same back then for everybody. All my friends, all our families, everybody worked. That's all. There was chores to do, and that's just the way it was.
Yeah, absolutely.
So most of the people that we ended up working with, they were already strong enough and had already done lots of work. So.
Oh yeah. So how old were you when you first got in as a casual worker?
19, I think.
Oh yeah.
It was like 18 or 19.
So would you
I
have been
must
one
have
of
just
the...
turned 19, yeah, that's right too. My birthday's in December.
You'd have been one of the younger guys on the crew, or?
Not really. There's a lot of guys who got out of school in grade 9, 10, 11 who were younger. For a year or two, they just went to work. Mm-hmm. I wasted all that time graduating.
But, and did it do you any good, do you think, that you graduated and finished all the way?
Well, I loved school. That was great. I had no problem with that. I had a great time.
Oh, yeah.
But my dad had a deal, too. He said, I don't care how long you're staying in school, you're graduating. And you did what my dad said, that's all.
Absolutely.
Or I did what my dad said.
Yeah.
He, I don't think he even finished grade 8, so he was quite determined that we all graduated. Yeah.
And did your brother graduate until grade 8, to grade 12 as well? Yeah.
My brother, my sisters, I think. Yeah, I'm the oldest of 11, and
oh wow!
I'm trying to think. I think maybe 2 out of the 11 didn't graduate.
It's a pretty good success rate, though. Did you ever think about going on to college or university or anything like that?
Yeah, my plan was going to go to university to become a lawyer.
Oh yeah.
Back then, but then I found out we didn't have enough money to do that, so I just went working.
Right. So work it was.
Yeah.
Yeah. And did you enjoy the job when you started longshoring?
Oh yeah, it was great. I figured every attention deaf disordered kid in Surrey and New Westminster and Coquitlam ended up on the waterfront in the 60s and the 70s. And it was a great job because it was different every day, lots of variety and lots of work and lots of spare time.
Oh yeah. What were the different types of work jobs that you would have, I guess, during the week or from week to week?
Well, so it'd be lumber, be lead.
Oh yeah.
A lot of sack jobs. The government used to have something called the Colombo Plan, and that's where they gave away all this fertilizer to third world countries.
Oh yeah.
112-pound sacks,
Wow.
apparently, which got taken over there and piled on docks and a lot of it never used.
Oh no.
At least that's what we heard. I don't really know
Right.
if that's true, but it was heavy in nitrogen and supposed to be for preparing soil to grow things.
Right.
If you spread it on your lawn, you could actually see the grass grow almost.
Wow. Beauty.
So did you have any jobs that you really liked, that your favorite task to do on the waterfront?
Well, once I got some experience and some time, I started driving crane, and I like doing that. So you end up driving equipment. That was the main thing. After the 1970s, that's pretty much all we did was drive equipment of some kind.
Oh yeah. So would that be once you become more senior or whatever, you'd move up to driving
Just
equipment?
when they needed you. If it was busy, you were assigned to, you take machine jobs of some kind, whatever was available, and you'd go do that.
So after the 70s, was that when it started getting busier and busier, or?
Well, actually, no. That's when all the automation and packaged lumber
okay.
and containerization started. So I figured that's when I retired, actually, because from that time on, I didn't really do an honest day's work from then.
What did you do after that? Was that when you went into the union
manual or like
administration?
physical.
You're being recorded.
But you'd count your manual work that you started out with as more like work than
Yeah. What I did afterward was just operating equipment, which I was reasonably good at. So
Right.
we did that all the time.
Did you find it was more or less enjoyable than the manual work, or
Oh, it's more enjoyable.
more enjoyable?
Yeah.
Yeah, less heavy lifting and
Well, it's not that so much. It's you concentrate on what you're doing. You have to be in control of. You're lifting tons and tons of materials above people's heads, out of a lot of times out of hatch openings that are narrower than the cargo you're taking out.
oh wow.
So you have to be really careful and know what you're doing. So time passed good, and like I say, I was reasonably well at it. So
Yeah, that's good.
So which jobs did you like the least?
the least.
I heard hides were really unpopular.
Yeah, well, hides were, nobody wanted to do hides. That was mostly Vancouver work. New Westminster was basically a lumber port, and that's where Pacific Coast Terminals was, and that's where all the lead metal products and even the mud ore and that they shipped out would go through PCT. Vancouver was the general cargo port. That's where all the general cargo goods and all
Right.
those types of things, store goods, and that would come in.
And would that have been because New West was more of the industrial center at that time, or?
That's just the way it developed, I guess. Vancouver was the port first, and then I guess Westminster, because it was the river and the destination jump-off point for going up to the gold fields and things like that. So I guess that's how how it got going.
Right.
So, and Vancouver's bigger; it could accommodate more ships and more storage area than what we had available. So.
And when you started out, did you know much about the union when you first got into longshoring, or how did you come to kind of understand what it meant to be part of the Longshoremen's Union?
Yeah, it's just something you learn as you go along. Like you say, with having that many people in the gangs, they taught you what it meant to be in the union and how to defend all the union benefits, make sure the manning was right, make sure safety was right, and those things. You just learned on the job. You learned as you went.
So what would they tell you about the history of the union, or the battles that were fought, strikes, that kind of thing, or?
Somewhat, yeah. You learn that as you went along.
Yeah.
1958, they had prior to 1958, there was no pension benefit on the waterfront. They had a major strike and a slowdown in 1958 because the work practices before that, as tough as they were when I started, and it was pretty tough work in some cases, was really bad before that, and there was no protection for the guys that you get hurt, or you had to do it or you got fired.
Right.
So after 1958, that all that lessened, I guess, became an easier to, well, not easier, but I guess more safety practices were put in place where you didn't have to lift so much and get more equipment to do it, that sort of thing.
And that would have been pretty recent to when you started. Was that the memory of that sort of battle still fresh in people's minds in terms of benefits that they just won? And
you have to, I guess, you have to understand the people that made up the workforce then were a lot of veterans from World War II who had been on the waterfront before and came back. A lot of people from logging camps, which were their own horror story themselves before that. And a lot of guys from the prairies, farmers for farmer families that had worked hard. So there was a lot of strong people, both mindset and strength.
right.
You had to actually see some of the strength that happened with some of the guys that. I've always been reasonably strong. My dad was a very strong man, and he would be just merely ordinary amongst the guys on the waterfront.
Right.
They just 2 or 3 of them were just absolute legends by what they could do.
Wow.
What and who would that have been, or what was kind of a show of legendary strength? Would that have been something that you would have picked up and held or dragged, or what? How did you know who was the strongest?
Well, you could see it as you went along. We had one fellow named Len Conquest. I think we're not sure if he was Swedish or Norwegian, but he was very strong. One fellow I knew, actually I went to school with his son, his name was Lance Horton, and I was working down below on lumber one job, and when you bring the loads of lumber down, they land them on a block and you pull the slings. Well, this one didn't get landed right, and the last tier of lumber was just off on the side a little bit. So when I came back, I picked up the end of my piece of lumber, and I was heading off with my partner. Well, that tier fell over, and it was about as high as a table. So I'm covered on this leg up to about here with 3x9s, as we call them.
Oh my.
And this Lance Horton came over, and I was trapped underneath. He came over and wrapped his arms, and this is heavy stuff, his arms, and reached down underneath past my leg and lifted just about the whole tier up while he pulled me out from underneath.
Wow.
And that was a lift that you have to see it to believe it. You have to see the material to believe it. If I was laying there, I didn't believe it myself.
Did you buy him a beer after that?
Oh yeah. He lifted me out on a stretcher and sent me out to the hospital. So.
Oh. And was your leg broken or anything like that?
No, just bruised up a little bit.
Ouch. And were there some men that found that they couldn't do the work physically, or they would start the job and had to?
Quite a few would come and start and then leave the waterfront. The other problem was it was either feast or famine back then. It's not it is now. So a lot of people came down, were already family men, already had families to feed, and they just couldn't hang around, so they had to go find steady jobs somewhere or go back up north, wherever.
Right. Because Fiona had mentioned that sometimes it would be, you might have 2 days of work a week or a half a day of work a week, and some weeks you might have 5 days of work a week, but you didn't know one way or the other always. And did you find that hard to sort of wait for work some weeks and not get it? And
well, when it was going short of money, it was a little hard to wait, but it wasn't too bad.
Yeah.
That was part of the good part. Actually, you didn't have to go to work sometimes.
Yeah, and Fiona was saying take time off and have some vacation time once in a while and with the kids.
Well, I can remember before we met and got married. Anyhow, we lived. My dad was actually the first auto wrecker down on the flats down off along Scott Road there, all through there. So I traveled to work from there. It'd be a day like today, summertime. I'd be driving in across the Patella Bridge, thinking, if there's work, I have to go to work, but hoping like hell there wasn't any.
On a nice day, you want to be outside. Oh my. And so Fiona was saying that you met when you, in 63 or 64, and were married in 65?
I think that was it.
So you would have met her when you were just a young guy on the waterfront and just kind of starting out
Well,
work?
we actually went to school together. She was 1 year behind me.
Oh, yeah.
Although we didn't, we knew each other's name because it was a very small school. You sort of knew who was there, but we didn't know each other then.
Oh, yeah.
As far as that, then it was a blind date arranged by friends of ours.
And it went well, obviously.
It went well. Wow. I don't know. I haven't been released since.
Oh my! So how did you find
held in captivity forever?
Did you have? Did you find you had lots of money to kind of socialize and go out for entertainment and movies and dates and that kind of thing? Like as a longshoreman, did you have lots of spending money at the time?
Oh, it was good money compared to other jobs. Yeah.
Yeah.
We did okay. When we had money, we spent it, and when we didn't, we didn't.
You didn't, yeah. It's amazing how that happens. My grad funding has run out this year, so I've learned that lesson. I can't believe how little I actually spend when I don't have any money. It's incredible. Oh, man. So your first few years, did you find that you went up through the different boards quickly to move from the casual board up to the next board and so on?
It was based on hours, and it's sort of a system that developed itself as more people came. But we have the membership, and then we have A board, B board, C board, and it's numbers driven. You have to make a certain percentage of the average hours for that board, and then when it came time to make the moves, then you would go up to the next board, which was more work opportunity.
Right.
And then after a while, you made membership, and then you were on the membership board.
Okay. And so how long did it take you to get to the membership?
For me, it took me 4.5 years.
Oh, yeah. And would that have been about average at the time, or fast?
I was getting longer and longer. Some people before that had gone in, after a year or 2 or 3.
Oh, wow.
And now it takes, right now it's taking about 10.5 years for people to make
Amazing.
membership. It's been up as high as 12 and 14.
Wow. Yeah, so that it's kind of seems like maybe a happy medium at the time that you got in, a good 4.5 years, and then you were in. And so did you feel like once you had become a member, was there, how did that work? Was there like a membership initiation, or?
Well, you go in front of the membership and take the oath, and initiation fee, there was a small fee to be paid, but you mean like a hazing or?
Yeah. Was there any kind of ceremony or anything like that for new members?
Only when you went out afterward and had a few drinks.
Yeah. So, and you had to, did you say an oath in front of, how did that work, in front of the union leadership, or was it all the members that would gather?
All the members at the union meeting, and you get up and the fellow reads the oath to you, and you repeat after him.
And would it be a batch of you all together on one night that would go in
Depends
together?
on the year. With me, there was 5 of us. Right now, we usually do 10 at a time.
Mm-hmm.
But sometimes there would just be 1 or 2, depending how many openings there were in the membership.
Oh, yeah. So would that have happened at a special union meeting that was just for initiating new members?
No, just a regular monthly meeting.
Oh, yeah. And would new members be admitted like every month, or would it be just once or twice a year, or?
Be every month if there was openings.
Okay.
If members retired or went foreman or something like that, and then they take you in.
Mm-hmm.
If it's real slack, then they would probably hold the membership off for a while.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's all dependent on what the situation looks like, I guess, in terms of work available and spots available. And
Well, it's all based on numbers. If it's busy and it stays busy, then we take members in. If it's not, then we hold them up. But right now, it's so busy that members go 10 every month. So.
Oh, wow. Right. And so you went out, did you guys go out to the pub after you were initiated as a member?
Well, then I did, yeah.
Yeah. And was it you that was buying rounds, or was everyone else buying rounds for you?
Oh, you buy a round. And, you're with a bunch of friends, you just
Here
do
and there,
whatever,
Mhm.
So.
Yeah.
It's not a special party, just sort of
Night out?
whatever it used to be. Well, a night out, you go to a bar and then whatever happens, happens.
Yeah. Did you go to the bar that's near the hall there, the Brownsville or whatever, pub there?
Oh, I quit drinking in 1973.
Oh, yeah.
So I don't know about the Brownsville. That's this side of the river.
Yeah.
What there used to be in Westminster was the Dunsmuir Hotel, which was known as the Bucket of Blood.
Why was that?
I don't know.
That
A
sounds,
little before my time.
that sounds grisly.
And then there was the Windsor Hotel, which they've torn down now and built a high rise.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was the King Edward Hotel on Columbia Street. I think it's called Rail Station now or something.
Mm-hmm.
And those were about the ones that you went to.
The main watering holes,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. Yeah.
Well, they were close.
Yeah. And did lots of guys go out and drink together, like as a group coming out off of a shift or something like that, or?
Oh, there was always a party going on somewhere.
Oh, yeah. Lively nightlife, I guess, among the gents.
I also heard there was drinking at the job too, like during lunch break.
No, it never happened.
No.
But
I
What was
remember
it,
the first time, Vancouver was the general cargo, and we had gangs sent to Vancouver, and it was the first booze ship I'd ever been on,
oh.
and I was in my second year anyhow. Anyhow, we're on this ship, and they take the hatch covers off. It's all manual then. They're all automatic covers now. But you had to get up and literally take the covers off, which were about 2 feet wide and 6 feet long. And the fumes coming up from the liquor, I guess you could have ignited them. Really.
Wow.
But at that time, they shipped it in the 12 bottles to a case, cardboard case. we didn't know it at the time, but this ship had a really bad crossing. It was all Scotch, came from Britain, Scotland, wherever.
Mm-hmm.
And the bottom 12 feet of the liquor was all been smashed because they hit heavy waves and everything.
Oh, wow.
Well, they didn't really know that until they cleared out a lot of it. But for 2 days, you got drunk on the fumes.
Oh, my
And
God.
when it turned out, when they finally got down to it, it was all this shattered glass,
Wow.
and I really don't know how they cleaned. We didn't finish that. We just heard about it. We worked on it for 2 days, and then we were replaced.
Would that have been the ship's crew's responsibility to clean the mess up with the glass and?
No,
like
the longshoremen would do it.
Oh, yeah.
You get extra pay for doing that, called salvage pay, but
Oh, okay.
it would be pretty ugly. So I'm not really sure how they would. Probably the booze they probably just drained out through the bilges
Yeah.
into the harbor.
That's a shame. Oh, that's Scotch. Oh, my goodness. Oh, gosh.
I've never forgotten that. You could stand back, and it was a nice day, and you could see it was like watching gas evaporate. You could see the fumes just coming up.
Oh, wow. Hmm. Hmm. Was there lots of material that would have come in, or I guess would it have often happened that material would come in that was busted or shattered or things like that?
Oh yeah.
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 And the longshoreman would have gotten salvage pay to do that kind of cleanup work?
Yeah. It's the if it was fragile and things like that. At that time, we didn't get much stuff from Asia. That hadn't started yet.
Hmm.
You know, most stuff that came in came from the East Coast or from Europe and
Mhm.
that sort of thing. So they just started then getting, I guess, store goods and that sort of thing from Japan, I guess.
Mhm.
But the rest of Asia wasn't involved really that I know of.
Hmm. Hmm. Okay.
So that would come in, it would be all ripped open, or depending on each cardboard box, depending what port it was in, it'd be, if guys were gonna go inspecting what it is, they'd go into the other port's cargo and rip open boxes and check out stuff.
Mm-hmm. Hmm. Did anything ever go missing off the ships, or was there ever any like theft or a bottle of scotch that would have gone lifted off a booze ship or anything like that?
Of course there was.
Yeah. Maybe especially off the booze ships.
Well, what they would do, and not just the booze ships, but when the Japanese oranges would come in at Christmas time and things like that, if there was a lot of it and they figured their foodstuffs and they figured there was going to be a lot of breakage, the crew would just bring out stuff and leave it by the hatch and say, here, don't touch the cargo. When you're out of this, let us know, we'll bring more.
Oh, wow.
So you never, some guys unfortunately did, but you never really had to steal any of that stuff. They'd give it to you just so you wouldn't break open boxes or cause damage or things
Oh,
like
yeah,
that.
so they just kind of tried to preclude that by offering
Yeah.
maybe a box of
They bribed
the
you.
oranges or whatever it was, yeah.
And if they didn't bribe you, they got threatened. So
And so would you guys have had much interaction with the crew guys from the ships that were coming in from these other countries?
some of the officers maybe, but not
too
too
much.
much. No, they
Yeah.
come by and do what they got to do and then leave.
Mm-hmm. And so would they have, I was talking last week to a machinist, and he was saying that they would have kind of stayed out of your way once the longshoremen came in to do their work on the ship. The crew was kind of out of the way.
Yeah, that's
Was
all.
that-
They
yeah.
they tied it up and then they did their regular maintenance jobs, whatever they had to do. But
Yeah.
they had nothing to do with us.
Hmm.
Were they allowed to leave the ship? Like, could they just walk around and?
Yeah, well, they would have watches and shore leave they could go. And, I don't know that any of them ever stayed. I think most of them came back. Most of them were English ships at the time, English, Australia.
Mm-hmm.
Not too many, like you say, not too many Asian ships at that time, not yet anyhow.
And I guess you didn't talk to them or anything, or could you talk to them?
Oh yeah. Most of them knew how to speak English, where we don't know how to speak another language.
Yeah. Same to
A lot
me.
of Norwegian and Lloyd lines. I think they're Swedish or Norwegian.
Mhm. So in terms of the relationship between you and your coworkers, were you in the same, like you wouldn't have been in the same gang the whole time that you worked, would you? Was it, you'd
Well, we had a
from-
setup for a while where you could go and work in a steady gang and just rotate on an hour basis.
Oh yeah.
And
And do a different job every hour, or be with a different gang every
No,
hour?
you just be rotate with the gang. You
Okay.
get dispatched. You wouldn't have to go to the hall. You just phone in and get your orders and do it that way. But that ran out after a while, and then we went and worked out of the hall where you went in just about every day,
Okay.
every 2 or 3 days anyhow, to get a job. And we had a kind of one group that you started with of about I don't know, 15 or 20 guys that we worked with most of the time, mostly because we were on the boards together.
Oh yeah.
But you ended up working with everybody eventually, one way or another.
Right. So did you have a sense of kind of a cohort of you, I guess, that were all tended to be moving along at the same pace from board to board?
Oh yeah, you moved along in your seniority spot unless you didn't get the hours, and then those people just dropped off the end and
Right.
went somewhere else or whatever. Yeah, you got your place in line when you started, and we moved along that way.
Mm-hmm. And did you and Joe sort of move along at the same pace to one another? Did you work with him a lot, or?
I worked with Joe somewhat. No, he took a steady job at Fraser Surrey after a while, and once we were in the gang, I liked driving topside so much that that's what I went and did. So,
Oh yeah.
so
Right.
we'd cross paths every once in a while.
What was the job that he was doing? Fiona had mentioned it was more of a 9-to-5 type job, like with more steady hours.
Yeah, we have what we call regular workforce, and then hall dispatch.
Mm-hmm.
So the different companies can hire people and have a regular rotating where you just go there to go to work rather than go to the hall.
Mm-hmm.
And Joe liked that, so he took that job at Fraser Surrey, and he was there for a long time. And then we ended up working together at West Shore once he moved out there.
Mm-hmm.
So
when you started, you didn't have to necessarily go into the hall like in the mornings to be dispatched, or could you just call in and have your order dispatched from?
once I made membership and went in a gang, I could, yeah.
Okay, but before you were a member, you would have to go into the
Go to
hall.
the hall
in the
every day, yeah.
morning. Yeah.
And being a casual, because jobs only last a day or so, you're pretty much in there every day.
Yeah.
A lot of days you didn't get any work.
Right. And so once you're a member, you might get a job that would go on for like 5 days or something like that, doing
At
the
that
same
time,
ship?
yeah.
Or?
But as time moved on, the ships got quicker and quicker, and if you stayed on a ship for 2 days, it was really unusual.
Yeah.
Where sometimes before that would be a couple of weeks you could be loading a ship.
Mm. Wow. And so those must have been nice to get that steady work if you could for like a period of a week or 2 weeks or something like that. Did you know, so at that point, if it was a big ship and you were unloading for a couple of weeks, you knew that you were going to have 5 days of work that week and 5 days of work the next week, or?
That was always nice to know.
Yeah.
When I was single, I didn't really care that much.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
but you still have to pay the bills. So.
Sure. Yeah.
It's just it's a system based on you show up at the hall and you go to work,
Mm-hmm.
and you don't have much choice in the matter. If you want money to pay the bills and spend the money to do whatever, you went to work. And
Mm-hmm.
we had a lot of guys that didn't. We had a few guys that I don't know how they made it, but
Right.
they wouldn't go to work. We'll go to work every once in a while, but I never could do that.
Mm-hmm.
If there was work, I went to work. If there wasn't, I went and played.
Mm-hmm. So do you think that was maybe distinguishing feature between guys who were successful in the work as a longshoreman and guys who were less successful in terms of just willingness to show up and be there every day to see if there is work, and if there is, to do it, and compared to the men who might have taken the liberty of the job too far and not shown up enough?
Well, it just depends on the person's makeup. That's all.
Mm-hmm.
Just how motivated you were, how much money you wanted to make.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the fellows who, once they made membership, they took steady jobs and they carried on making a good living, as they just couldn't get out of bed to come to the hall in the morning. That's all.
Yeah.
But there was only a few of them. Most everybody was the same deal. They just showed up at the hall and went to work when they could, and if they didn't, then they showed up again the next day to
Mm-hmm. And so was there a morning dispatch and an afternoon dispatch?
Morning and afternoon, yeah.
But no, Fiona was saying that there was no graveyard shift at the time. You wouldn't have been working.
No, when
overnight.
when I started, the shift was 8 to 5 and 5 to 11.
Okay.
And then 1969 negotiations, I think they went to 24 hours. So the shift went from 8 till 5, 5 to 1 in the morning, and 1 to 8
Oh, wow.
in the morning.
So was the change to go to 24 hours something that the union wanted or something that the employer
we fought
wanted?
it, but by that time we had run afoul of the government, and they have what they call the Ports Operation Act in place. And it ran into an impasse, so then they brought in the outside third-party mediator, and they more or less wrote the contract for us and told both parties, here it is, if you don't like it, we'll do something to you.
Oh, wow. And what had precipitated that? How had the longshoremen run afoul of the government at that time?
Well, we went on strike.
Oh, okay.
We went on strike and we shut the ports down.
Mm-hmm.
That's never a good thing.
Yeah. And what year would that have been? Was that
1969.
69?
Well, we had a strike in 1966, I think, pardon me. They had a big strike and slowdown in 1958. I think it got to 66. Joe's the one who's probably got all the dates and figures for the histories. But 1966 and then 69 is when I think when they passed the Ports Operation Act.
Mm-hmm.
And they came and told the union that if they didn't agree to go back to work, then they would use the Army to load the ports, load the ships.
Oh, wow.
And it was over the grain, actually. I'm missing that part. The grain was a big money maker for the employers, so they told the employers that they wouldn't get to load the grain, the Army would do it, and neither one of us would be part of it. So we were ordered back to work, and we went back to work.
Mm-hmm. So what was the experience like of being part of a strike, I guess, as a guy who was, you would have been a member by then, no, not by 66, but by 69 you were a full member, and
1965 I was a member.
65, okay. So, and what was the experience of leading up to a strike and deciding to go on strike as a member? What was that like for you?
Well, those decisions are made higher up than I was aware of then.
Mm-hmm.
Local, the area and the different locals get together, and they form a negotiating committee, and it didn't go well, and we ended up going on strike. So I think we were on strike 30 days the first time.
Mm-hmm.
And you'd be on the picket line and cover 4-hour shifts and cover the 24 hours, and just go down with a partner and sit on the picket line until your replacement came.
Mm-hmm. And would the union have paid you out for picketing wage, or?
No, we didn't. The ILW didn't have a strike fund as such.
Mm-hmm.
If anybody got in real distress, we had a credit union at that time, we'd probably help them out, but for the most part everybody managed on their own.
Mm-hmm. And did you have a sense of what was going on as someone who wasn't involved in the higher level decision making at that time? How much of a sense did you have about what was going on with the negotiations eventually leading to
Well,
strikes?
all we would know was when they came back, they call special meetings or regular union meetings, and they would inform us what's going on. But I always did take a bit of an interest in it, so that's why I got involved.
And when did you get involved with the union leadership side of things?
1970, I think. I ran for business agent and made it.
Oh, yeah. So there would have been like elections and that kind of thing if there was more than
Yeah,
one
we're
person
the
that
only
wanted
one of the
job?
few unions that has our officials are elected every year, except at the ILW Canada level, it's every 2 years.
Okay.
But we have no lifetime appointees.
Mm-hmm.
They
So
don't-
you've got to contest your seat then. If you've got a job, you've
Well,
got to
you
run
gotta-
every year.
You got to do the job, or you get bounced.
Yeah. And you'll be called to account, I guess. If you've not done it, then you've got to run again. I guess, is that the idea behind it? So
Well,
that's
somebody will
your-
run against you and they'll vote you out.
Mhm.
So,
And so your first job, you said, was business
business agent, yeah.
agent. And what did that involve?
Well, you're a part-time dispatcher, and then if anything goes on out on the job, safety concerns or manning issues, accidents, you go down to the ship, and somebody gets fired or something, you go down and argue with the employer or the employer's representatives,
Mm-hmm.
which I was reasonably good at.
Yeah. I guess having wanted to go into law school, maybe you were a born arguer, yeah.
I'm just a born contrarian.
Did you like that job? Did you enjoy the work?
Yeah, I did it for 2 years, and then I was went back to work.
Mm-hmm.
Gets a little boring after a while.
Mm-hmm. Dealing with was it the same kind of issues over and over again, or?
A lot of negative issues all the time you're kind of involved in, so I would rather go do other things.
Yeah. That's what Fiona had mentioned too, actually, as shop steward. She said a lot of the things that she had to deal with were negative type things. And
well, it
she
is
hadn't
when you're
enjoyed-
dealing with...
I guess, yeah.
When you're dealing with across the table or even talking to the employer's representatives on main issues, that you can do something with, they're reasonably smart people too,
Mm-hmm.
and you can usually have a pretty good argument going or
Mm-hmm.
make, and come to some conclusion.
Right.
But if you're arguing with some guy who's, half drunk when he showed up to work and gets fired, there is no good,
Yeah.
there is no good argument.
Yeah.
And it's really hard to make an argument on his behalf.
Right. I bet it is, yeah. And
But
would
I-
that have
but
been
I
something
did.
that you would have, as the representative of that guy that maybe showed up drunk to work, was that something that you would have had to lobby for on his behalf in terms of keeping his job for
A
him?
lot of times I made the deal with, because I knew especially in Westminster, the superintendents and the walking bosses, as we called them, we all knew each other fairly well.
Oh, yeah.
And a lot of times they would just call me, or the other business agent, not just me, and say, come and take him away.
Yeah.
No repercussions, just come and take him away.
For the day and
Yeah.
have him, yeah.
You go home and straighten up and come back to work the next day or a day
Yeah.
or so later, whatever.
So did you benefit then from having a good working relationship with the employer's representatives that you dealt with sort of regularly?
Oh, I think
You
so.
think?
I
Yeah.
got along fairly well, yeah.
That's good. There was never any fisticuffs or any any
Oh,
fights
no,
or anything
no,
like
no,
that?
No.
No.
Some pretty good heated arguments sometimes,
Yeah.
depending on. There was a couple of guys who'd come up from Vancouver, but that was at the moment. You'd have
Mhm.
an argument,
In
and
the
then it was
moment,
over, and then on to the next thing.
Mhm.
I never held a grudge or anything, but
Right.
I would always get even, though.
Yeah. You get your way, I guess, most of the time, ultimately.
Well, the advantage we had is that the job always has to go on,
Mm-hmm.
regardless of the argument, whether it's safety or manning or that sort of thing. So you just say, listen, here's what we do. Let's get it done, and I'll get the guy out of here, or get it fixed. Get the MOT or the Ministry of Transport down to do the inspection on the gear,
Mm-hmm.
and because a lot of times the ship would be shut down for faulty gear.
Oh, okay.
And have to be fixed. The shipyards that have to come in and do all kinds of repairs on some of these ships that have never been looked after before.
Mm-hmm.
So that was the main thing. The guys showing up drunk, usually, or half drunk after a long night it happened, but not that much. Mostly it was safety concerns over ships that needed a lot of repair.
Oh, yeah.
There was apparently, and this comes from some of the ship's captains and crews, that if a ship could work in New Westminster, it could work anywhere in the world.
Really? And what did they mean by that?
The gear, the equipment, the booms, and all the running wires, and all the equipment you needed for loading the cargo was always in good shape. When it came
Okay.
to New Westminster and wasn't, it didn't work until it got fixed. So
Right, so there was just a high standard of safety then.
yeah,
In terms
very
of,
much
okay, so that's
yeah.
what they meant. I was talking to the machinist who I was talking with last week, and he said that a lot of the times the ships that came in that might be registered in like Libya or something where they didn't have as stringent safety policies as we did, he said a lot of the times he worked for Webb and Gifford, and he said a lot of the time they would have to come in and do safety tests and that kind of thing on the cranes and
Mhm.
everything like that, because you didn't always know whether something was up to snuff in terms of up to Canadian safety standards and up to the Union safety standards
and
and
they-
that kind of thing.
the representatives from the Ministry of Transport would come out. They had the authority. We can shut a ship down based on safety, refuse to work on safety, and then they have to come out and do the actual inspection, even though it's pretty standard. I mean, you can look at a piece of equipment and figure out whether it's not good or not. You know, if the steel rope, as they call it, the steel wire for the runners, the lifting runners for the cargo, is all frayed and slivers coming out of it and that sort of thing, and you know it's been roughly used. And
right.
It's probably pretty weak. So.
Was that someone's job to take a look over everything before the job started and say, I think this ship is okay to unload, or I think this ship needs to be inspected?
Well, that was all of our jobs. That was all the guys.
Just to keep an eye out?
As the gangs and the workers went on the ship, that was their job. The top side for the gangs, mostly the hatch tender and the winch drivers, that was their main responsibility.
Okay, just to make sure everything seemed to be on the up and up safety-wise, and there was no red flags or anything like that, and then you would proceed with...
Well, you could tell. Some of the old Greek ships that came in, I don't know where they found them from, but I'll tell you, they were just unreal.
Yeah. Poor condition, that kind of thing?
Oh, terrible condition, never fixed. They would put putty in where steel would be rusted out and then paint over it.
Oh my goodness.
You know, that sort of thing.
Oh, jeez. Wow. That doesn't
so we said
seem
a few
legit.
times,
Yeah. Oh my. Oh my. And so you were the business agent at first, and then what was your next job with in terms of working for the union?
I guess I ended up being vice president and then president in the early 80s. And then I got out of that again and more or less stayed in vice president for quite a while and on the executive. At West Shore I was, along with others, I was on the negotiating committee for quite a few years. And I was never officially a shop steward, but I usually was on any argument that was going on for things. So.
Did you enjoy the vice president and president work? Was that a different kettle of fish maybe in terms of...
Oh, it was different from business agent because then now you're in charge of the whole thing. But, we didn't really work that way. It's not really a top end thing. We all kind of work as a group, or at least the guys I worked with.
Among the executives, sort of working as a team on things?
Well, we have a president, 2 dispatchers, a secretary treasurer, and 2, maybe 3 business agents, and then their replacements when they were off out of the executive. So it was kind of a small group and usually got along. What you had to do, the focus of your job was pretty standard. You know, it wasn't too much variation. Either you went to the ship and made sure it was okay, or it wasn't okay, and then you took the steps that you had to take.
So while you were doing that kind of work, would that have... You wouldn't be doing your normal longshoring work at the same time as the union work, would you? Or were you still...
No, president and business agent
would take up your
job.
time, yeah.
That's a full-time job.
I bet. Yeah. And did you find that there were any kind of particular challenges to being, say, the president and being in charge of everything? Was there anything that was unpleasant about that job, or challenging? Or?
It was a 24-hour-a-day job in some respects. If something happened, because you're working around the clock, and if something happened that was serious enough, then I would have to, or not just me, but anybody who was president would have to be involved in it. But, and
would it have been you that would have dealt with injuries and any deaths that happened among the memberships? Like as president, were you? I guess you would have been involved in all of that.
I had to make one trip to a family where a fellow had been killed on the job.
Oh no. And so it's the president's job to kind of knock on the door and let the family know and represent the union in that way?
Well, at that time, yeah.
Yeah.
That would be a thing that I would do anyhow. You wouldn't leave that to somebody else. I don't know what somebody else's decision would be. But by the time something like that happened, it's pretty well all over the place. So.
Yeah. And so was there was only the one death under your tenure as president, or on the job?
Well, that's the only one I had to deal with. We had a few over the years. That one happened when I was president, that's for sure. The others, I don't think so, no.
What had happened to the fellow who died while you were president?
He had finished his job and was driving off the dock. He had his car on the dock, and I guess he'd come back in, he forgot his lunch kit or something, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And as he was driving down the roadway, a forklift came out from in between the lumber piles and smashed into his car.
Oh no.
Oh my god.
Oh wow. Jeez. Goodness me. And so that must have been a hard part of the job, was to go to the gentleman's front door and talk to his family.
Fortunately, I didn't have to tell his wife. I told his son.
Oh
His
yeah.
son was home. His wife wasn't home at the time.
Oh, okay. And was it
I
an
got
adult son that you were?
Yeah, he was
Second?
on the waterfront as well.
Oh, okay. Yeah, another longshoreman, or?
Yeah. Well, he
Yeah.
had just started. He was fairly young. So I
Oh, okay.
told him. I said I'd come back and talk to us, and he says, "Don't bother." He says,
Oh,
"Okay."
yeah.
I said, "Well, call me if you need me." And
Right.
never heard
Oh,
from
that's-
him again.
Yeah. I think that was good of you to go, kind of as the president. It probably was is a good way of handling it, I guess. As part
I
of the union
wouldn't know any
leadership.
other way of
Yeah.
handling it.
Yeah. Yeah. And so would that have, if someone passed away at work or died on the job, was that something that was kind of acknowledged among the general membership? Was it felt? Was it talked about, or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
At that time, I mean, we've got quite a few more people working now. At that time, we had a membership of maybe 300 people,
Mm-hmm.
and maybe the same number of casuals. So we way under 1,000 people.
Right.
We have maybe between 2,000 and 3,000 people.
Oh, wow.
You know,
So you likely would have maybe at least known the name or seen the face, or if someone had died.
Oh, I knew him very well. Yeah.
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. And was it was it kind of I guess, would it have felt somber in the hall for some time after an incident like that would have happened, or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
You have that, and then when that happens, whenever somebody passes from whatever cause, we have a minute's silence at the meeting.
At the next
we stand
meeting.
and do that sort of thing.
Mhm.
It's a bit somber, but it's, you just carry on.
Yeah. And we were talking to Fiona about whether she worried about you when you were at work, and she said, well, yeah, I did, but just, it wasn't always at the forefront of my mind, she said, because you couldn't be, because you were at work all the time, and you can't be worrying, I guess, constantly about your safety and that kind of thing, but.
Well, I guess we never realized how dangerous it was until we were well into it, so.
Yeah. Yeah, less of a sense, I guess, about that, yeah, for sure.
So, when you were president, did you see that it was more standardized safety on the waterfront? Like, when did they implement more training?
Well, as it progressed, the training, the safety practices on the job, that was up to the people who were doing the work. They started through the labor classes out at. Oh, great! Why can't I remember the place here? Out by Abbotsford, anyhow. I've gone blank now. The resort place out there off from Agassiz up on Pitt Lake.
I don't know the name of that place.
Anyhow, they every year they do labor courses out there and teach people who want to become shop stewards and different things. The Labor Standards Act and the different things, the government acts and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
So we send people there pretty much every year.
Mm-hmm.
And so does Vancouver and all the other ports. So,
Oh, yeah.
but safety is a very individual thing. You can't describe safety from here. You have to be there on the spot at the moment to figure it out whether it's safe or not.
So did you find your safety training that you had gotten kind of as part of the gang system and on the job, did you find that maybe a more effective way of learning, perhaps?
Well, yeah, because it's very visual.
Hands-on, yeah.
With that, it's not like
Rather than studying from a book or something like
well,
that.
from a book or even the computer. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
something goes wrong with the computer, you have really no idea
Yeah.
by looking at it. But the equipment that we use for loading ships is very visual.
Mm-hmm.
If the shackles and the working wires are not in good shape, you can see it right away.
Mm-hmm.
So that part is easy, and the rest of it's like looking at a beat up old car as compared to one that's not beat up. You can see it right away.
Hmm.
And while you were president, were people of different ethnicities becoming members? Like, when did that start coming in more diversified?
I think as far as the race, I guess there was English, lots of there had been quite a mass exodus from Yugoslavia, and we had a bunch of guys here, but they were basically all the white race
Right.
type until
So like Europeans.
yeah, and then East Indian population started showing up, I think, in the early 80s.
Mm-hmm.
I knew a few. I lived out, went to school out in Millardville for a while in elementary school, so I knew a few East Indian families from out there, but it was very, very minimal, really. And I suppose it was through the 80s and into the 90s, and they started, the culture started changing.
Mm-hmm.
Now it's, when you walk into the hall now, it's like the United Nations.
Wow.
Yes. Was there any pushback from the membership in terms of immigrants increasingly becoming members, and especially in, I guess, a union where it is so much father and son and generational membership and that kind of thing?
Oh, there was some resentment, I think, because I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this, but the first people coming from India were not very strong, and they couldn't handle the job really, and we were supposed to make room for them, and that's
Right.
so that was a little bit of stuff. But as the generations have evolved, then it's no different than working with anybody else now, really.
And why do you think that was? Do you think it was just because they had come from a different background of types of work that they were doing in India, where they hadn't gotten as strong as perhaps the men who had been working on the waterfront or doing things like that since they were younger? Or?
To be strong enough to work on the waterfront, you have to work on the waterfront.
Yeah.
You know, and the same with the mills and logging camps
Sure.
and different things that were going on back then.
Right.
I had a friend of mine, his dad worked for Jack Seawee Paving out there, which is still around. And his dad was tremendously strong, and he was too, because of all the physical work, and all the jobs are physical. So when somebody couldn't do it, it was quite evident.
Right. And did the women who came in have trouble with that in terms of just physical strength and being able to do the job and
By
finding
the time the women were starting on the waterfront, there was, well, maybe the sling jobs and hooking up the gantry hooks and that sort of thing was. I drove a gantry crane a few times where women were hooking up, and they struggled with it because it's a lot of. Got this big heavy bar. Say this is what we call the gantry head, and the hooks would be hanging down like this. And there would probably be about 12 of them on each side, and they're all air controlled. So you have to take them, snap them down so the hook catches, and then put it under the wires that are around the pole, and that can be quite difficult sometimes.
Right.
And working down below, they had their challenges, but most of them made it, as far as I know.
And maybe helped out by mechanization and that kind of thing as well, but sort
Well,
of evens
everybody
out
helps.
the playing thing.
There might be a few people who won't help, but everybody helps, and
Yeah.
you build into it. You know, if you need to be strong enough to do that, and your living depends on it, you get strong enough, or else you figure out a way of doing it.
Right.
So.
Yeah. Sounds like
And then
you're...
once they get up, I mean, we have lots of jobs that are not as physical now.
Yeah, sure.
So.
And how about in terms of increasing the increasing membership of women? Was there pushback about that in similar ways in terms of jobs being taken up by people who were maybe physically weaker or anything like that?
I think once it became, I guess, the human rights, environmental, all the government agencies and all the rules changed. Instead, you had to allow women to work. You couldn't say no.
Mm-hmm.
And we just said, okay, that's fine. We changed our name and we just carried on. We never, as a union, we didn't push back. Maybe some of the guys did. The first woman to get hired on the waterfront or tried to put to work was a fellow who was president before me. And we had one of our members who was killed on the job, actually. He rolled off a deck load on a forklift and drowned in the river.
Oh, no.
Well, his wife, they had family and that, and this fella decided to put her to work one night on a car job. Well, there were about 50 or 60 car drivers, and when a woman showed up to go to work, well, they all quit.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Just en masse in terms of as a
Yeah,
show of.
they wouldn't work.
Oh, wow.
But he just did it on his own. There was no, there's nothing through the membership or through the meeting or through the proper channels or anything. He
Okay.
just, I'm not sure what he was thinking about that night, but
And that was the president who would have put her on
yeah,
as the
president
worker?
at the time who did that.
And do you think part of the resentment then was that he hadn't gone through perhaps the proper channels in terms of instating that this new worker, or?
Most of it.
Yeah.
And then she hadn't been given a number. She hadn't gone through the proper channels.
Oh, okay.
And as much that as being a woman at the time, because women didn't work on the waterfront, and there was no intention for them to work on the waterfront, really.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody ever thought about it.
Yeah.
You
And
just-
do you think the women that would have started out and being some of the first, do you think they had a hard time in terms of the environment, the atmosphere, that kind of thing, in terms of whether there was any
Well, back then, the
resentment or-
times I described, women couldn't do the work.
Mm,
You just couldn't.
right.
It's just, like I said, the sacks were 112 pounds, the coffee sacks were 240 pounds. Maybe there were some women around who could have done it, could have worked into it maybe, but it just wasn't thought about. It just wasn't an option.
Right.
And,
But did you ever work with any women? Or would you have been kind of closer to being done
not,
shoring work by then?
no, not on a physical job or a manual job. Topside driving crane and gantry, women were on the slings and down below. But,
And it sounds like your niece has made her way through it. We were talking about strength earlier with Fiona too, and she says, well, my niece is a pretty strong girl because she's sort of made it through, and she's got the apprentice work going on now. And
Karen, it's a funny thing we talk about in our family, and I don't mean that we're that much stronger than a lot of other people, but there seems to be a gene in my family that there's strength to it, and in the women.
yeah.
My sisters were always a lot stronger than the other
Oh, wow.
girls and women. I didn't know about it at the time, but my sister Louise, I guess she terrorized a few people along the way.
Oh my
They-
goodness.
She didn't take any crap, and
Yeah,
we tried to give her
good for
crap
her.
and got it back. But Karen is quite strong. We joke about the gene coming through.
Yeah.
And my brother's daughter, Ashley, if you grab her hand, it's like that or like that, and push, you can't dislodge that arm.
Wow.
Well, I mean, maybe I could if I really,
Yeah.
gave it, but just a straight, steady push, she'll just stand there and hold you.
Wow.
Just,
My
So-
family must have the opposite gene.
Yeah.
I can't do much heavy lifting at all of anything, of any sort, but
People
You get
are
better.
people are usually a lot stronger than they give themselves credit for.
maybe, yeah, maybe.
You'd be surprised what you could do if you really had to.
Yeah, I mean, I guess you told the story about the lumber falling over on your leg, and I mean, maybe the guy who lifted
Well,
that off,
Lance Horton was his name. He was a bit of a legend on
Oh,
the
yeah.
waterfront as well, And then I went to school with his son, and he was quite strong as well. So-
Yeah. Hmm. Hmm. And did you ever have? Did you tell me a story about an accident that you had? Was that you you were unloading lumber or something like that, and I can't remember. I think you might have said someone saved your life or something like that at the time. Might have been.
Oh no! Well, yeah, the last guy that You might have it now. Have you got the interview? Did Dean interview Lauren Briggs?
I don't know who Dean has interviewed yet, actually. I haven't taken in his SD card yet.
Oh, because that last Friday we were at the school, he was going to interview Lauren Briggs, that's the guy who saved my life.
Oh, yeah.
And we were just covering up a hatch and got tripped. Actually, I leaned forward to reach the rope on the beam, and my butt hit the wall, and I was going forward in the open hatch. And Lauren was right behind me. He's a pretty strong guy in his own right. He grabbed me by the shoulder and pulled me back.
Oh, my God.
And his comment at the time was, "You're not getting out of work that easy."
Oh, my. So it seems like, I guess you all depended on one another, hey, to keep an eye out for each other and...
There wasn't too much animosity among guys. There was a few guys that didn't get along, but for the most part, we just went to work and went home or went and had a party and whatever. It just was just a great way to make a living.
Yeah. Yeah. So ultimately you enjoyed your career as a longshoreman, and do you feel like you are is that part of your identity now as being a longshoreman? Is that kind of part of
very
how
much
yeah.
so, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I guess that's why I'm stuck in this, well, not stuck, but that's why I'm involved in doing this other stuff here.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you think
or as
that...
Joe says, it's like the mafia, you gotta die to get out of it.
So that's funny. Oh, man. And did you feel like there was a point at which you were like, I'm a longshoreman now, like this is part of my identity? Was that kind of right away as soon as you became a member you thought, okay, I'm part of this now? Or was it something that sort of came out over time? The longer that you worked, you felt more and more part of something?
More like that. More as I went along, got involved, got better at my job, and a little more comfortable and that sort of thing. But no, I never thought just because I was a member of the ILW that I was anything special. I was just another working person.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it does seem like it's sort of unique in terms of how much it affects your guys' lives and the way that you spend your time. And Fiona was telling us all about the picnics, all the family picnics and that kind of thing, and that there would always be a present for the kids at the Christmas party and that
it's
kind
always
of thing.
it's always been a real warm existence.
Very much a family kind of environment between all of you, yeah. And I guess it must be less like that now, just in terms of the sheer numbers of membership.
Well, we always criticized the Vancouver local because they were so large. They didn't have the closeness that we did. Mm-hmm. They'd be spread out all over the waterfront in Vancouver, and it was they'd have different groups on different work sites, all working to better their own site and not maybe so concerned about the overall picture. So,
right.
So where we were usually we'd make our decisions on what we wanted to do and accomplish, and that's what we'd do as a group.
For the greater good of the local. Great. Well, I think we've probably taken up enough of your time. But thank you so much for telling us your story. Okay, so you're going to tell us about the King Neptune.
Yeah, well, it was a world-renowned seafood restaurant on the dock in New Westminster, and according to a lot of the ship's crew and captains, people around the world, the reputation was going far and wide.
Oh, wow.
Westminster, in their wisdom, when they decided that they wanted to get the docks and the shipping companies out of New Westminster for whatever reason, they wouldn't renew their lease.
Oh.
And they were just a major restaurant, so they got shut down. And actually, I'm not sure where it got relocated to. They cut it in half, loaded it on barges, and took it up somewhere. I don't know if it's up the coast or Sheesalt or Gibson's Landing or maybe it's
the restaurant itself.
Yeah.
Oh, holy!
Yeah, they relocated. Whether it's still in operation now, I don't know. We never did hear after that. But some of the photos,
if it is.
some of the photos of the waterfront that you see in behind from where the keg is and up to the left, that's where they would have been.
Oh, okay.
And I think there's a couple of pictures in there that actually have the restaurant there.
Oh, wow. Did you guys ever eat there?
Yeah.
The Longshoremen, for lunch and dinner?
They had great buffets.
Oh, yum. Lots of fresh seafood, I guess, that had
Oh,
just
yeah.
probably
All-
come up from
All you can
Richmond.
eat for $1.50.
Yeah.
Wow.
Back
Yeah.
then, anyhow.